studying for the SAT, odds are that you need a little bit of a refresher on geometry. Maybe this is something you used to be really good at. Maybe it's something that you never had a good grasp on. The good news is, on this particular test, what you need to know about geometry is extraordinarily limited. And if you can master the material that I'm going to show you in this course, basically you're good to go. Let's start by looking at the material as it appears in the beginning of the test. What we have is a full list of the equations that they'll ask you to know about: circles, area equations for circles, rectangles, triangles, Pythagorean theorem, a couple of ratios. These are worth paying attention to on special right triangles. That is, the ratios of the sides can be predicted. If you know one of these three sides, then you can know all three. Same thing with the 45, 45, 90. We've got some volume equations down here you can take a look at. And then just a couple of statements at the bottom about the number of degrees. Let me grab my writing tool here. A couple of equations about or a couple of facts about degrees and radians, and the sum of the measures in degrees of the angles of a triangle is 180. I want to extend that fact before we go any further, which is, one other way of thinking about this is that the number of degrees in the sum of the measures in degrees of the angles of any polygon, if n is the number of sides, it's n minus 2 times 180. Okay, so if it's a triangle, n is 3, you'll get 3 minus 2 is 1, 1 times 180. That's where this number comes from, you could say. If you had a four-sided figure, n would be 4. If you had a five-sided figure, n would be 5. And this equation here is one of the only equations not given to you that I think is really useful on this test. Okay, so let's jump into some questions. And what I've done is I've compiled from old SATs a list of really, more challenging questions. I won't say they're all super hard, but they're questions that are more challenging, and I think that this is where you should go when you want to learn. The easier questions are not going to be helpful to everybody. They're going to be helpful to some folks, but everybody can learn from these hard questions. And if you can come to understand these hard questions, then the easier material will, very naturally sort of resolve itself. So I don't think this is above virtually any student. And I'll try to go slowly enough that it's not above you, even if you feel like, you're bombing the geometry section and you need to sort of build up from the ground floor. One last thing I'll say, there's a free resource that you should absolutely use if you have sort of no foundational knowledge in this section or any other section of the test, which is Khan Academy. It's great for, learning the basics. The reason that you should work with me on the more advanced material or to understand how the test works is that Khan Academy works with the College Board. They certainly do a pretty good job of laying out the important skills that you need uh, in terms of mathematics, but they're not going to teach you how to think about the test as a game. A good metaphor I like to use is, imagine you're an athlete and you're preparing for a big game. Let's use tennis. So you're preparing for a match, and let's say that your opponent's mother or father is an excellent coach, like one of the best tennis coaches in the world. And let's say they're really ethical and they want to help you. You could rely on that person to teach you about your tennis game. But what you wouldn't expect is the parent of your opponent, even if they're incredibly ethical, to teach you about the fatal flaws of their son or daughter who is going to play against you in the match. Right? Khan Academy is a parent in the sense that they work with the College Board. Right? They want to make the test useful and effective for all. Their mission is aligned with the test makers, right? And ultimately, I don't think it's best to think about yourself as aligned with the test makers. They're standing between you and the school that you want to go to, and your job is to beat them at their game. And maybe there's a less adversarial metaphor that we could use. Uh, I think that can work as well. Basically, if you get to know this test really well, the test makers stop being your opponent and start being your friend because you can leverage your skills, right? But with that said, let's look at these questions, trying to understand how the test makers are building the questions and how we can use the predictability of the test to be prepared for a new question, something strange that we maybe haven't seen before. All right, so we'll start with this first question on my set here. You can see I have 45 questions in the set. And if we cover these 45 questions, you should be good to understand this exam in full.